So today's video is a fun one for me because I have created my own teacher's guide for our history this year, pulling in lots of different resources and putting the information in one place so that I can use the bits and pieces I want to as we go. And today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you what those resources are and a look inside of my teacher's manual. Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. So if you're new, I'm a homeschooling mom of three. This next school year, I'll have a first grader, a kindergartner, and a toddler. And I have done a lot of work on what I'm about to share with you. I have put so much time into doing and redoing our history this year. And I have finally settled on what we're going to do. And I have created my own teacher's manual, guide, activity guide, whatever you want to call it, to go with it this year. And so I want to show you that. I want to show you the pieces I'm going to be using, and then I'm going to flip you the camera around and actually let you see inside and kind of how I formatted this. Bear with me today. I am still sick and my voice is a little off. And if my video has a weird cut somewhere in it that doesn't quite flow smoothly, I probably sneezed and didn't want that in the middle of the video. So uh, I will try not to sniffle my way through this too much, but I wanted to record today anyway. Okay, so for history, um, we are using, well, okay, let me start by prefacing this something. I realize what I have here is a lot. The resources I'm going to show you, the different books I'm pulling in, I have quite a bit in here for history. But I am not set on using all of it. So let me preface that. I have a main spine, and then I have options to go with that spine throughout the week. I can pick and choose what parts I want to use. So number one, I don't have to use all the pieces if it's too much. And I'm well aware it may be too much. And two, I'm aware that it may be above my children. My children may be first grade and kindergarten. And I mean, I may have chosen something slightly above them. And if that's the case, that's okay. If we have to drop all the resources, if we have to drop my main spine and just go with the picture books and the encyclopedias, and that's what we do for history this year, I'm okay with that. I have an awareness that we may have to shift and adjust. But even if that happens, I will be really glad that I used and created my own resource because I have all the pieces. I can pick what works for us and drop the things that don't. And I will have this for reference next time we come around to ancients. And I can pull in these same resources or different ones into what we do with our next cycle round. So just put that out there. I know this is going to be a lot. I'm not set on using every piece every week, and I'm okay with dropping things if they don't work. So putting that there, and let's go. So the pieces that I'm going to be using, the main spine, which we're going to be using, and I really hope the glare on these things isn't too bad as I'm showing you, but we're going to be using Story of Civilization, Volume 1, The Ancient World. So we're studying ancients this year. And this book, as I mentioned in our family subjects, is actually a Catholic book, and I am not Catholic, so I was wondering if I could use this. And I read through it, and I'm confident that I can use this because ancient history is really, really same up until the time of Christ, which it does touch on in the last few chapters. But since I'm going to be the one reading this out loud to my children, and I read through this to make sure, I'm confident I know what I would change when I read those chapters, and I'll just mark the book up when I get to that point and, mark them, we won't read this part or change this slightly. It won't be that hard for me to do. So I will be using this. I am bummed because I won't be able to use the next book because I feel like the time of the Renaissance and Reformation, there's quite a bit of differences between Protestant and Catholic. And so we will be changing to something else. And I do have a plan as to what that is, but that's not what this video is about. For this year, I'm really excited to be using this because I had a hard time finding something for ancients for the elementary grades. Last week, I actually shared a video about Story of the World because that was one of the ones that I was considering using originally and why we're not using that. You could check that out if you're interested. And then once I decided I wasn't going to use Stories of the World, I thought, well, maybe I'll use Easy Peasy. And I did a lot of work trying to get that formatted for myself in a way that made sense for me. And then I decided, no, I'm not going to use Easy Peasy because I found this. And I looked at lots of other options in between. And it really came down to the fact that I was having a hard time finding something that was suited to younger children other than Story of the World. Okay, so with that said, this is our main spine. I think there are 35 chapters in this one, so 35 weeks if we went just by chapter. And then along with this, I'm going to be pulling in as a side read, Child's History of the World. Not this whole thing. This goes through quite a bit more than just ancients, but the time that is relevant to the ancients. And one of the main reasons I'm pulling this in is because I plan to use this next year. We're going to be using a few Ambleside online recommendations for history next year, and this is one of the books. And so I thought, well, why don't I keep it cohesive when we can start with this year alongside of this. But if we have to drop one of these, if it's too much reading, we'll drop this one and keep this one. That's my plan at this point at any rate. So these would be my two main spines, this my main one, this kind of a secondary spine. And then along with those, I have 4 encyclopedias that I have matched up what pages would apply to whatever week or chapter we're on in here. And I've marked the pages that would apply for the Usborne Internet Linked Encyclopedia World History. I have also done the Kingfisher, this is a tome, Kingfisher Illustrated History of the World. This is a big book. And I'd marked any pages that would apply to whatever we're reading in that one. I'd done the Kingfisher History Encyclopedia and the Usborne Book of World History. The other thing I've also done, because I own all of these, is I've gone through and marked up any images that I thought were inappropriate for my young children. I do not like nude art, and even if it's accurate to the time, I'm teaching my children that's not appropriate, and so I have marked up any images that I thought were inappropriate. So these are totally ready to go for my kids in particular. Okay, now along with that, I'm pulling in activities from Easy Peasy. I've marked any coloring pages or online activities or any of the activities that I thought would be interesting, and I have marked which ones would apply to match up with which chapters in here, and the activities from Story of the World, because I had this book already because I bought Story of the World originally. I've marked any activities, coloring pages, mapping pages that would go from here that I might want to use along with this. So I feel like I have quite a bit of resources there. Oh, and then the biggest one for me, because my children are young, this is probably the one that I'm counting on the most being like the most fun for them out of all of these resources, is I have gone through hundreds, and I do mean hundreds, of picture books surrounding ancient history. I went through the lists in here. I went through the lists online. I'm trying to think. I went through Biblioplan. I've gone through so many lists. And then I just searched my library for picture books relevant to whatever the topic on each chapter was in here. I had done so much work on these, and I have seen which ones were in my library because that's really the ones I'm interested in. I'm not buying a ton of history books this year. There are plenty of options out there. I ordered them all and I previewed them and narrowed it down to the ones that I approved of. Meaning they didn't have a large focus on mythology or the other gods. Not that they didn't mention them because it was part of their culture, but that wasn't the focus of it. Things that I felt like were mentioned in an appropriate way for the ages of my children and the way I want to introduce that. So I have picture books. Depending on the week, there's an occasional week that I couldn't find a picture book that matched up, but most of them have at least one to, I think one week I had like 15 picture books that I found in our local system. That would be great. And so I'm excited about that. I think even if we drop down to, like I said, even just the picture books, I think my kids are going to learn a ton. So knowing that that's all the pieces that this guide encompasses. Okay, the other thing I want to mention is I did mention that this Story of Civilization is a 35-week program. I did add 3 additional weeks of history using different things. So for the introduction, I did borrow, since I already have it, Story of the World's introductory chapter talking about what is history, how does time work. I'm talking about archaeology and all that. And so we will use that for our introductory chapter in this program, and I did mark that in here that we'll be using that. And then I added 2 more weeks based off of 2 chapters in Child's History of the World, because the Story of Civilization doesn't focus on a lot of civilizations outside of like Egypt and Mesopotamia and that area. And so while I'm not worried about focusing on all the cultures, I didn't pull in North and South America or a lot of the other areas, because this is, again, elementary history. We're going to come back around and we can study those in more depth. And I also will give my kids total free reign to go through the encyclopedias for other cultures that were around at the same time. That might be a fun activity that we'll do. But this one did pull in also China and India. And so I thought, well, I'll use the 2 chapters in here surrounding China, 2 or 3, I don't know, a couple of chapters in here surrounding China and India, and make 2 more weeks of work. So we get those 2 main ancient civilizations in there as well. So there are 2 chapters that are focused on myths and don't have Story of Civilization. Excuse me. In there. Okay. So with all that said, what I want to do is I'm going to turn this around and give you a flip through and see what I created and how I've organized all of this to work for me. Okay, for the great reveal, or at least that's how I feel about it. It's probably not as exciting to you guys as it is to me. But I just jumped straight in with a rough plan. I'm going to go to, I think, about here, because I think this will give you a good idea of all the different pieces that are going along in this. So on this side, I have all the resources available for the chapters. So week 3, Story of Civilization, and that is this book here, chapter 2. This is the title of the chapter, and this is all of the main things that this chapter talks about. So it talks about kingdom armor, the 2 kingdoms of Egypt, and hieroglyphics. Those are the 3 main topics. And then along with that, you can see Story of the World, chapter 1. Oh, I have that doubled chapter. I have an error. I'm going to have to go correct that. And then here it says CHOW, chapter 6. That would be the chapter that it is relevant to in Child's History of the World. That would be the one that would link up to these topics in here. So if I want to read this chapter here, that would be that reference. Okay. And then we have our Story of the World activities. So I abbreviated all of these because I know what they mean, but STOW, Story of the World activities, mapping pages 6 and coloring pages 3. And those would be relating to these pages in the back. So student page numbers. Whoops, I don't think you see that. Student page numbers here. Those are the pages that I'm referencing in the back of this book. So any activities that I want from those pages will be marked there. And then EP here stands for easy peasy activities. Now, I do have to say these lessons, so I have lesson 5, hieroglyphic code break, lesson 7, papyrus, link and make papyrus, lesson 12, ancient Egypt timeline. Now, these lessons do not actually coordinate with easy peasy's lessons that they have online. And why is that? Because I thought I was going to use easy peasy at one point, and I spent so much time. I took everything off of their entire site. I opened the links and copied the text, and I made my own manual from easy peasy. I downloaded it into a document, I formatted it, I inserted all the images that were applicable that were on the sites, and I created, and then because it didn't quite match the number of weeks I wanted, I reformatted a few. I put a few chapters together, moved a few things around. And so as a result, these lesson numbers are relating to the manual that I created from Easy Peasy. They're not the actual lessons online. But I think if you wanted to use these, you could probably search Easy Peasy for this like hieroglyphic code break, because I actually use the names of the activities that they had. And you could probably find them on their site that way. But just a heads up, these lessons may not, some of them will, but some of them will not line up with their lesson numbers on their website, because that is relevant to the reformatting that I did for myself. And I can't share that with you because it is their information. So maybe at some point, if people are interested enough in this, I could go through and mark what lessons these actually came from on their online source. If this would be something that you would actually use, I would consider doing that for people. But otherwise, I'm not going to go down because I don't need it. Okay, so the next category I have here is pages from encyclopedias. So we have US-World or WH. So that would be this one, the Usborne for US, World History, UH, and that would be the page numbers in this one that it would apply to. And then I have the US linked, and that would be the Usborne Internet Linked Encyclopedia, and any pages that would be relevant to this in this one. And then we have KHOW, and that is the Kingfisher. Let me grab this. Oh, man, this is heavy. Kingfisher History of the World, any pages that would apply to that one. And we have King H Encyclopedia, the Kingfisher History Encyclopedia. So those are all of those. And again, not every chapter has correlating sections that match any of these categories, but this is one that kind of had them all, so I can walk you through it. Okay, and then I put a section for memory work. I created I don't know if it was one section of memory work that had 10 to 20 facts, or if I did 2 separate ones. But I have any memory work that would apply to this thing, anything that I want to add to the memory work. And I could show you in the back here, the memory compounds. I don't take it out. So this one would be, I'm going to have to learn my pronunciation, but this fact is here later on. I just keep adding to it. So everything they'll have memorized up until this chapter is going to be listed here. So I don't have to go back and see what they memorized 2 weeks ago. It's all here as one big list of, it looks like I chose people and the dates they lived. Okay, and then, oh, I skipped this one, timeline. So any main people or events or things that might be of interest to add to a timeline, I added here so that we could do that. If just really easy, pull it out. I don't have to look through the chapter again if I wanted that. And then we have picture books, and these are picture books that are in our library system, or if I own one, that I've approved. Now, with libraries, it's kind of hit and miss, especially if other people want the books. You can order these books and maybe only get 2 or 3 by the time that you're interested in doing it, and that's okay. I'm just going to order all these, whichever ones come in, we'll use those. I also have a spot for chapter books. if I want to read a chapter book with my kids, or I think I even have, if I found an early reader, I put that in some of them. I didn't find a lot of early readers for all of these. And then any additional encyclopedias that I could get through our library, because there were some encyclopedias that were relevant that I thought would be fun for my kids to look through. So I marked those as well. And then this section is just a section for me to make any notes that I want to, because you never know. And then when I use it, if I use this or any of these resources next time around, I have my notes in the same place. Okay, and then this side is a bit of an experiment for me. I really want to start using narration. And I know that this year my narration is really going to focus just on her retelling it back to me. I'm not going to have a ton of prompting or all that. But I thought I would have this here for my own reference and if I want to, or even to mark down some of the things that she pulls out with her narration. So this first one is new vocabulary or concepts. And this would be as I'm going through the chapter, if there's any words that I think is unfamiliar to them, that I want to explain to them before we do the chapter so they understand better about what we're reading. Or if there's any words, new vocabulary words for myself that I need to figure out how to pronounce before I read out loud. Same thing here, important names, locations, or events. Often those things, especially in ancient history, are things that I don't actually know how to pronounce. So if I mark those down, I can look them up before we do the lesson and I can pronounce them correctly for my kids. There are also things that I can remember to point out to my kids after their narration. If they've missed them, is there something in particular I want to focus on, I could have those here. Next, we have vices and virtues or moral points. This would be anything in particular that I want to point out and have a discussion with my kids about, or I think would be worth discussing with my kids or mentioning, relevant to the characters in whatever story we're reading. And then cross-subject connections. So if we talk about some scientific discovery, that would be a cross-subject connection, or some language discovery, that would be cross-subject connection, or math, or anything that would be relevant to other subjects. Just making those connections, marking them down. And again, like I said, I can do some of this before the lesson, anything that I think is valuable to have out there, but I can also mark down anything that my child pulls out in her narration or anything that she notes and have these. And again, as much as this is just an experimental page for me, but as much as useful this year round, anything that I mark down, I can also come back when we go through Ancients again and look at again. Okay, and then each chapter is really laid out about the same. Now, not all the chapters have as much activity as that one. And I think I did mention that some of these are based off Child's History of the World rather than Story of Civilization. This is one of them, the India civilization that book didn't really have. And the next one would be China. And this one, like I said, had a ton of picture books, and this one had an early reader as well. And so these are some, but let me go to one that has a little bit less. So some of these really doesn't have that much, like this one. So week 24, it has a chapter of Story of Civilization. There's no Story of the World activities that coordinate. There were no easy peasy activities. The encyclopedia pages didn't really have much on it. There was one picture book I found, and there was no Child History of the World coordinating chapter. So this week is going to be really short. And I feel like because I have so much out there, some of these shorter chapters can help me. Like if we're super interested in one culture and I want to go an extra couple days over or into the next week, some of these shorter ones, I mean, this is going to be a really quick week. We're not going to have hardly anything to do. So this really could take up half a week versus a whole week. And we could move something that's more interesting a little longer. And so while some of them are really heavy on a lot to do, some of them have a lot less. This one has a student page from Story of the World and one encyclopedia referenced, a couple of picture books, but it doesn't have a lot of other extras. So I feel like just depending on the chapter, depends on how much there is. And we can stretch some longer than a week and some shorter than a week. But the basic goal would be that each chapter is roughly a week. All right, guys, I hope that was helpful. I hope that was interesting to you. I would love to know any comments or feedback that you have for me. If you have any additional recommendations, I'm not opposed to adding a little more back in. Um, yeah, I would love to know your thoughts. This has been a lot of fun for me to make. I enjoy doing these kind of things, and when I got deep into it and just like did it straight for several days and came up with something I'm really excited to be using. I'm really curious to see how it's going to go. If all these pieces are going to be at level for my kids, or if I'm going to have to drop a few. Like I said, we'll see. But I am excited to use something that I've created. I don't know. It's just been fun. I've had fun with this. So again, share your thoughts. Let me know what you think after seeing this. Um, if it's something you guys would use, I would love to know if it seems like useful to other people as well as just to me. I know I've created it for our homeschool, but I'm always curious to see what's useful to other people. And as always, I hope you guys are having a great week.